So today we're focused on the Emmaus walk, the story of these two disciples. And it's incredible to think they were in Jerusalem on the very first Easter. They heard from the women. They heard reports of the empty tomb. And yet something happened in their hearts, for they're walking away from Jerusalem. They're walking away from the community. And we don't know why, but it's not a good sign. Because if they really believed that resurrection had happened, that Jesus was even more than anybody thought he could be, they'd stay, right? They'd find a way to stay in Jerusalem, to be there in the community, but they're walking away. And what's amazing to me is that on this Sunday, on this very first Easter, Jesus has risen from the dead, and there's 40 days until the ascension, and there's so much to do in that time. And on the very first day, Jesus thinks the most important thing to do on that evening is to spend 2 hours walking with these two disciples who are walking away from the community. He spends 2 hours walking with them, teaching them about how God has been at work. He starts with Moses, and he unfolds the entire history of salvation and the ways that God has been at work, the ways that God has been pointing to this moment, to this very day. And they don't realize it at the time. Jesus doesn't announce his presence and say, how could you miss this? And open their eyes at the very beginning. It's only when they convince him to eat with him and they break bread together that they realize what's happened. And they hurry back to Jerusalem. But it just tells me something about the character of God, that on the very first Easter, Jesus would choose to pursue two people walking away. And thanks be to God for the grace and the love of God that pursues us even when we're walking away, even when we shouldn't be. But the God who pursues lost things, people who make poor choices and walk away from community. God pursues us and doesn't give up on us. And we don't, just like the disciples, we don't recognize it at the time. But may we, when we go to the communion table, may we see how Jesus has been at work in our lives and in our hearts in so many ways over the years, over the decades. May God open our eyes to the grace of God that is at work around us.